Hello everyone and welcome to the studio. It is Monday, it's demo day, and today we are going to do a really fun painting where I get to use that new Terry Ludwig set that I showed you in our intro video, and we are going to focus on foregrounds and trying to manipulate the foreground to create interest and to draw the viewer into the painting. And the time of day that we're painting is late afternoon. Sun is starting to set. Well, it's getting very low in the sky and things are just glowing. And the photo that I'm going to be painting from, I took during this, what is known as, I don't call it, it's known as the magic hour. And if you've ever found yourself during this time of day and looking at something or maybe even another person and they're just glowing like with an orange glow, right? That's the result of the magic hour, when the sun is low in the sky and is very warm and everything it touches glows. So we want to try to capture that magical time in today's painting. So come on closer to the easel and we'll get started. All right, let's begin by talking about the pastels that I'm going to be using for today's demo. I thought it would be a perfect choice for my floral landscape set of Terry Ludwig pastels. And oftentimes I'll just pull out this set and use it exclusively because it is already a limited palette. But as I talked about in the intro, this was voted as the artist choice, I think it was last month, and it's called the Cosmic Sunset Set. Now, to my knowledge, it is not available. It was like a limited time. Now, they may bring it back, but what I have done is made a little color swatch sheet with the numbers. I'm going to put a photo of this in the description of this video, so you just scroll down and read all about it, so that if you like any of these colors, you could certainly order these sticks open stock. So, and the other thing is, if you don't have Terry Ludwig pastels, but you like this palette, use this color swatch sheet to match pastels that you do own. I'm not saying that you have to have Terry Ludwig pastels to be able to paint. It just happens to be one of my favorite pastel brands. But another thing I wanted to say about this, now Terry Ludwig pastels, when you get a new box, you get this sheet where they give you the color number and a little box so that you can make swatches before you mix them all up. Even if you buy a pastel set and it doesn't come with a color swatch sheet, you might want to do this. Now, you might think, oh, that's a great idea, and I do that anyways because in case I run out of a pastel or I run low, I'll know what color it is. That is actually not why I recommend doing it, because I find that I very rarely, maybe if never, go back to a color swatch sheet and say, oh, I'm low on this one. That's a V300. I need to order a new one. That's not what I do. I usually try to match the color to the value, the intensity, if it's neutralized or gray, or if it's vibrant and pure, and try to find something similar. But why I like to do color swatches when I get a new set is because oftentimes the color that the stick is not the color that it makes. There could be a very slight difference, and it's just helped. For example, this one, let's look at this one, V180. This is the V180. To me, it looks much grayer in the photo than the actual stick. So it just helps you get to know your sticks, you know your colors a little bit more, kind of get you excited about your set before you dive right into it. It is nice to have these to keep these in case you want to use them to replace sticks, but usually that's not what I use them for. Oh, here's another little quick tip. I like to take these once I make them and put them in a laminating sleeve and laminate them. So, nowadays you can get a laminating, portable laminating machine for inexpensive, and so if it's not nailed down, I tend to laminate it. But this is a good thing to laminate, because then you're no longer going to smudge your little color swatches. All right, and so now here, just another quick look at my floral landscape set that I'll be using, and then I'm going to actually start off by using this Cosmic Sunset set, because some of these colors, I think they're actually very similar, some of them, to what's in my set. I'd have to look at my numbers, but these yellows definitely I don't have. So this is going to be fun to play with. All right, now let's take a look at our subject. Here is the photo that I took. This was a very magical moment. I took a bunch of photos from this place. This was Provence, and I was just out for a little evening stroll or late afternoon stroll. You can see the sun is just set and everything in its path is glowing. So in order for me to get all this to glow, I need to make sure I have my darks dark enough and the shadowed areas dark and cool enough so that the warm orange glow really comes through. Now, what am I using for my paper choice? I have decided to repurpose another painting. Let me pull this off to see what paper this was. I can tell by the back. This is interesting. This is a piece of Pastel matte. So I repurposed the original painting or demo or whatever was on here by in my intro demo, I took some rubbing alcohol and just liquefied it. This time I took some clear gesso and liquefied the painting with a stiff brush, brushed it on, kind of made a mess with it, and it liquefied the painting, but it also gave me a rough texture, which is really interesting because, as we know, Pastel matte is sanded, but it's smooth. So this is going to really give me a nice, interesting texture to respond to, which I think will be perfect to capture all of this layers of grasses and weedy stuff. So I think that's going to, having that textured surface will give me a head start. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same hard pastel that I used for the previous painting, and I am going to very lightly just kind of draw in the big shapes. And what I like about this is I think I had in mind I was going to paint something with palm trees, and so I actually kind of gave myself a head start. I'm going to change, not going to be palm trees, it's just some tree shapes, some dark tree shapes. The sun is going to be in this area here, and these are all going to be dark, cool tree shapes. I really like the photo and how these kind of weedy seed head type objects are kind of going in this Z formation. And even if they weren't, I'm going to force them into a Z formation so that I can lead the viewer into the painting and through all of this stuff. This could easily become a huge fence of grasses and stuff that just kind of stop you from moving in, right? Stopping the flow of the eye movement. So by orchestrating where we place our major players, we can sort of get a head start into eye orchestration or eye movement. Okay, so I kind of have a feel for what's happening here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to layer the dark shapes. Now, what is dark? We can squint and we can see that the trees in the distance are dark. And by making them dark, this is one of the dark violets in this set. By making them really nice and dark, it's going to give us a head start, as I said, to get that nice warm glow. The other thing that I'm going to do with this dark is I'm going to pull it very roughly along the this diagonal line and all the way across the immediate foreground. I'm creating a suggested pathway for the eye. Now you can see that the pastel is skipping over the rough grooves of the paper created by the gesso, and that's kind of just what I want to get that textured effect. I'm doing another layer of a dark purple. This is a duller, that was more of a blue violet. This one's more of a gray, duller violet. Let's go ahead into my set and add a dark blue. So really what I'm doing is I'm building up all of the darks to get a nice, really interesting effect with the darks. Instead of just saying, oh, it's green, let's just use dark green. Yeah, we could do that, but it might be not it would not be as interesting. Now, sometimes when we work on a very rough textured surface, it can be a little bit frustrating because we can't really get the darks dark enough because of the little bits of light peek through. Now, in some areas, that's actually helpful, like at the tops of the trees. We want the light to peek through. But down here where it's more dense, we really want our darks to be nice and solid. So I'm taking a piece of pipe insulation foam and just pushing this first layer down into the grooves of the paper. That's going to help me have my darks dark enough, and also ultimately you'll use a little bit less pastel because you are filling the really rough areas. And I know sometimes when you're new to using a textured surface, it can be a little bit frustrating to fight the grooves. Now I'm introducing another dark, but this is a warm dark. This is a dark red, kind of a brick red. I'm using it to start to introduce that feeling of warmth coming through the darker trees. Here's another red. This is a slightly lighter, a little bit more intense, but still a dull red. And I want to make sure I have the right balance of warm to cool. So right, these areas that are furthest away from the sun, I'm going to come in with another dark. Ooh, that's not quite as dark, is it? This is a dark blue-green, and I'm going to use it in those shadowed areas. It's not really quite as dark as I might like it to be. So what I'm going to do is go in with another dark green, just to modify it a little bit, to knock the blue back just a little bit. So this is actually a little bit of a warmer, darker green, but it's just going to add, make the blue green a little less blue. And the other thing that I can do is come back again with my dark blue and do the same. No. There we go. Okay. So we have all our dark areas in place. We have nice, interesting, rich darks, warm darks, cool darks, and we are well on our way to capturing that glow. Now, one thing that I want to do before I move on to anything else is to take that really nice Terry Ludwig eggplant that we've been talking about, and anywhere where I think it's going to be extra dark, I'm going to put it in. So remember, we use it as an accent. Put it in a few key areas so that it really has more power that way. If we have it everywhere, it loses its impact. So in the immediate foreground, definitely. And then right here, I have just a hint of some of the trunks in this particular tree. I like the way this tree is kind of leaning towards the sun. So let's just throw in a few tree trunks over on this side as well. Pull that down just a little bit so we have a little bit more of an ambiguous horizon line right there. All right, so now that I have all the darks in place, I'm going to do one thing and then we're going to move on. Now, I want to fix these darks, right? I want these darks to remain nice and rich and dark. And we can use our rubbing alcohol spray. I'm going to use some workable fixative. As you know, I have been using the Blair Very Low Odor, which is no longer available. So rubbing alcohol in a spray bottle has been working also for me. But there are other workable fixatives that you might choose that also will fix your darks in place. Let's put a little bit too much on there, so we're going to have to let that dry just a bit. So while we're waiting for that to dry, let's think about what's happening in the grasses. I see a lot of interesting purple flowers. Some of them are in the shadows, some of them are really getting a halo of light. But there's distant grasses back in here that we need to address. We don't want them to be too bright, so they kind of have to be dull. They kind of have to be cool. But I also really like the idea of adding some color underneath the green so that we can have another interesting color for our greens to respond to. So I'm in the Cosmic Sunset set here, and I'm introducing some of those nice, warm, dull. Look at how interesting it is where the very light touch, how it's skipping over some of this texture. And that's kind of replicates that feeling of the light just kind of sprinkled on top of just some of the little weedy things. Now I don't want to put that everywhere because then it will lose that glow, that impact. Here's another. And also, I also don't want to make this area too warm. So I'm trying to really be... Look at this. This was a probably something that was in the underpainting, and it just made a textural mark. This is a good color that I can use for the dirt in the shadowed areas. This is that dull violet, gray violet. That will work. It's not, it's on the cooler side, but it's not ice cold, so it kind of looks like dirt, so that works. Look at all that texture. That's so much fun when we have that kind of fun texture to work with. Let's see, I'm going to move this off to the side for just a second. Let's reevaluate where we are at. Now the darks are definitely dry. I think what I want to do is kind of paint the sky and the sunlight, the sunlit areas, so that I can really start to get that warm feeling. The first thing I'm going to do is take a rust, so a dull orange, and wherever the sun is touching the edges of the trees, I'm doing a very light touch with that. So it's just kind of skipping over. I'm going to pull it down into the grasses just a little bit more. Where would the sun be touching over on the right-hand side? Not everywhere, right? A lot of it was in shadow. But some of the branches are picking up some of that glow. Now, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and put in the sun, and I'm actually going to start off with a red. You notice here, you can see it's kind of got it's touching whatever distant green stuff there is, and it's just got this kind of halo of a red. So I'm going to start with that darker red, and then I'm going to go with an orange and let those overlap, and then I'm going to get a little bit lighter with my orange and pull it up a little bit more and start to sneak that orange in between some of the branches on both sides. And then I'm going to go, these are from my set, by the way, and they go, I have them arranged in order from the darkest to more orange to more yellow. So this is a yellow orange. And let's go one lighter. Well, it's not really lighter, it's more yellow. Now we've started to lose our tree. Notice that our tree shape has gotten covered up on both sides. So we're going to just kind of reintroduce the darks to get that tree shape back. Because I think those dark shapes are really necessary. Now, we're going to get this to glow even more. So we're just not quite there yet, but we are definitely on the path to making this glow. But what I need to do now, before I go any further, is start working on the foreground stuff. right? So some of those marks that I put in earlier, I've now covered up, but there's no reason to panic about that, because basically what I need to do is arrange them in such a way that they create movement for the eye. And I think what I'm going to do is start with violet. There's a lot of purple. This little round mark is just perfect. There's another one. They were there, right? And here's another one. They were there from that initial underpainting, almost as if I had planned it that way. Sometimes that happens, right? That's just serendipity. And what's important for us as artists is when we're working and we recognize, hey, I didn't put that there, but man, that actually is working out. And then when we do see these things, it's important that we say, okay, it's working, so what do I need to do? I need to enhance that, or, you know, or at least not cover it up. Okay, so what did I just do while I was talking? I switched to a really nice blue violet. I like this shape here, this whatever this weedy thing is that has some purple bits on it, and so this is a good color for more of the shadow. It's cooler compared to this purple mark. This purple mark is a little bit more reddish, right? And this is more blue. So these can start to be in the sunlit area, and these blue violet guys will be in my shadowed areas. So this is really subtle manipulation here, but hopefully it starts to really enhance that feeling of that glow. This is another blue-green that I'm just putting in. I am noticing that some of these marks in here are a little bit deeper blue-violet, and yep, as luck would have it, that's exactly what's in this Cosmic Sunset set. It's blue-violet similar to what I have, but a little bit darker, slightly darker value. So I can use that in this area, in the shadows. Let's put a few of these guys over here. I'm just making, I'm talking about mark making this month, and how most often it's just individual to, it's a personal thing, right? How we each, ooh, this is darker. Let's go ahead. I picked this up. I didn't realize how dark it was, but let's go ahead while it's in our hand and get some stem action. So I'm using the side of this hard edge pastel just to kind of press and release, and I get some nice broken lines for some darker stems. But let's go back to this idea of mark making, and how it is important that we embrace our own personal calligraphy, the way our tendencies of making marks. But marks do a couple of things that, you know, helps us understand where we're at with them. They can help describe something. So the way we make our marks can show the lay of the land, if something is smooth, if something is fluffy, right? Marks can describe. But marks also can show emotion or expressiveness or movement, right? And that's where kind of our individual take comes out. How expressive do you want to make your painting versus how realistic we want, right? And so playing with marks and how we apply the pastel really also says a lot about our own way or preference of working. All right, so that dark purple from the Cosmic Sunset set really start to give me some more contrast between the dark areas and the light areas. Look what's happening in this corner. As I'm adding some of the darker values and leaving a lot of the lighter values, or it was originally dark, these are darker, and we're starting to get a little bit of feeling of depth, like you can go behind that particular flower. And that's That is actually a really fun thing to do, to pay attention to. Okay. Now we've got some of these weedy shapes, for lack of better terminology, that are in the light, so they are a little bit warmer. They're not quite as purple, right? So I'm going to use this kind of gray, blue-gray. It's not blue-gray. My fingers are blue-gray. Okay. Kind of brownish. Still warm, right? Still working right now from that Cosmic Sunset set. There's a variety of shapes and sizes in this weedy area, and my goal is to capture a wide variety so that I have like a lot of interest and depth in this foreground. But right now I'm not really paying too much attention to the visual journey, like how is the viewer going to move around. Remember initially when I started the painting I had that V shape, so now I need to come in and start to enhance that journey. What I'm going to do at this stage of the painting is two things. I'm going to give it another quick spray. When I'm building up a painting that has a lot of weedy stuff or a busy foreground of grasses, I do like to use fixative several times, maybe 2 or 3, just depends, so that I can really focus on getting the darks dark enough and then building upon that. But I'm going to let this dry. We're going to come back with fresh eyes and we'll finish the painting. Alright, now that it's dry, I think what I'm going to do is finish up the sky, get that sky to glow, and then we'll know where we want the weedy things to glow, and we'll kind of enhance our visual journey. So, a couple things about what's happening in the sky. One, this lump of a tree is not that interesting. And if I look at the photo, I'm not about copying the photo, as you know, but I feel like these two are very close to being twins, and I'm wondering if I made this a little bit shorter and show a little bit more sky, that might actually be a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a haircut. Also, I didn't put much pastel up in that upper corner. We can use it. It can stand to have something. Alright, so now that I've given it a haircut, also, let me just say this. When you're giving something a haircut, meaning you're changing the shape, making it smaller, making it larger, make sure, because it happens all the time, that you don't make it into a boring shape. Like, it was a boring shape, don't make it into a smaller boring shape. You always have to stay on top of things to make sure that you end up with something interesting. So I think that's a little bit more interesting. I'm using the dull yellow to kind of carve into it to get some air or some sky holes. And the same thing is true with this particular tree. I really liked how we had that little kind of indication of a tree trunk, and we kind of lost it along the way. I just want to kind of reintroduce some of those darker branches. Okay. And then over on this right hand side of the painting, the sky is actually starting to cool off, right? It doesn't have that glow. I'm going to lighten it over here. That's a paler yellow. But over here I actually need to get it a little bit cooler. I need to transition it into, that's not light enough. This is kind of a pale violet in the shadows. But I need to have that transition that actually makes sense. So that's a good one. That's a pale violet. I almost feel like to get it from the warm yellow to the violet, I'm going to introduce a little bit of yellow green, pale yellow green, kind of as a transition color. And I'm going over that violet as well. And add some of this cooler yellow green over onto the left-hand side. I'm just kind of introducing this yellow in places just to give some sky hole. So that's working. Now let's get this glow going here. Really need to kind of pull out some more of this orange. I'm going to sneak a little bit of this orange over here on the right. It's just peeking through in a couple of places. Same with on this side. These little marks, we'll talk about mark making. Look, all I'm doing is just a few little dots. Now I'm softening it with my finger. Watch, I put in a dot and then I soften it so that I don't have hard edges. But these little guys, these little marks that I just make, help give a little bit of sparkle and a little bit of life to our scene. Now, I am going to introduce an even softer pastel because I really want to nail this glow. So this is the Sennelier half stick from the Paris collection, and I can just really get, when I press down right here where the sun is, I can really get a nice chunky mark that I can't really get the same effect with any other pastel. Now, one thing about getting the sun to glow is it's actually lighter in the middle. See how it's almost white? So I'm using a really pale yellow and then just kind of going over that orange, and I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to spread it out just a little bit. I don't want a hard edge to where that sun is. Out of the corner of my eye, I see this dark area here. I'm going to tend to it right now because it's one of those things. One of those things is you notice something. A lot of times it's important that you address it before you go much further. And I wanted to add something there that had that warm glow. So a little bit green with a little bit of orange on it. And that kind of fills that space right there. So I just put it in there right now while it was really like on my mind. But I need to go back to this. I'm not quite done. And I'm going to kind of nail the center with, it's white, almost white, but it's a pale yellow. Now look at how that sun is really glowing because I started darker, got a little bit more intense, got softer pastel so I could get smooshier marks. Then the other thing that I think is happening is my transition here from the cool to the warm. I lost it a little bit. So I just kind of add some more of the yellow over into the blue. All right, now I've got my sun glowing. I've got to get the stuff in the foreground to glow. So we've got these really wonderful purple things. There's some purple weeds and some greenish weeds. I love this red violet. This is a really interesting pastel. It seems like when I'm pressing down, there's kind of reddish in it. It's kind of this, kind of magical. Love that.
There's a red line on it.
I know. There's a red line. I'm wondering if that's why. Okay, I think that's what happened. It has red on it. That's really cool. And Michael's laughing at me. He's like, no, that's not really the pastel. The pastel has some red residual on it from something else. All right, that's okay. I have fun. I'm just making a variety of marks. So now I've got the reddish ones, and then we've got the ones in the shadow that we talked about already have more blue in them, right? So we're gonna kind of enhance those. That might be a little too bright. Okay, so I'm just having a variety of marks, some cooler shapes here. Now, notice there's some greener ones that are coming up towards the light. Well, they have a lot of green in them, this guy right here. Because there's light still here, I can still see some of the green. So I'm going to use this green and kind of bring it down into the sunlit area. And then we can still, that might be too bright. We can still see some green over in the shadows, although it's not as intense. There are some pretty intense greens right down in this area, but there's also, we can start to see some of the grass marks. So I'm going to actually use the tip of this pastel to get some linear marks. Oops, almost lost it. Grab it. To get some linear marks in here. This might also be a good time if you like to use harder pastels, or last month we used those pastel pencils to good effect to get some really nice grass marks in here. A good variety. Here's an interesting thing happening. Oh, that's not thin enough. That's too thick. We got some nice warmer grasses in the sunlit area. Ooh, that's good. Sometimes it really works well when your stick is sharp. Get some of those warmer grasses down in there. Now, let's get that halo effect on our flowers. So on the edges where it's catching some of that light, I'm coming in with that nice orange and just giving everything a little bit of a halo, but it can't be everywhere. If you put that halo everywhere, right, then all of a sudden it loses its impact. So just think about where's the main event happening, right in this area right here. Use the side just to kind of let that light kind of sprinkle, then it comes here, so we're going to get a little bit of a glow on this guy. Soften it with your finger after you put it in. Some of them are just glowing orange shapes on their own, so instead of outlining things, I'm just making some of those glow marks. There's a little bit of residual over here, not as bright. Let's see if we can add a little bit of a darker glow. And then over here, I'm just going to add some little touches of a warmer yellow green. And then step back. This is important when you're doing these marks. You want to step back occasionally. Like I like to say, make 3 marks and then step back. Make 3 more marks and then step back. Because that's when you, that's how you prevent yourself from overworking things. Now, one thing that I really like about some of these flowers in here is they're kind of fringy. So I'm going to take my bamboo skewer, and instead of painting fringes, let's see if we can't remove some pastel to get that kind of fringy effect instead of just balls. Little petal action. This is a really good color for the glows in the shadows. So where it feels like there's getting some light. And so what's happening, my goal is to have your eye come here, come over in here, then back here, and then we need to come, you know, kind of finish the circle, if you will. So I need to enhance this over here a little bit. And notice what I'm doing here at the end. I'm just making it a little bit more intense, or lighter, but still an intense color. What I'm doing at this stage of the painting, and this is, and I've talked about this before, but this was always the part where I lost interest. Not really lost interest, but just was ready to move on to something else, right? And so I would get to this end of the painting. It looked decent enough. I was happy enough, and I would move on. And once I realized that I was really doing myself a disservice by not slowing down at the end of the painting. You know, yeah, it was fun to move on to another painting, but then if I started to slow down and be more thoughtful with my finishing marks, oops, I had better results. So we do this in our paint along series, so if you're not a silver tier member, consider joining us, because on our monthly paint along we actually go through the painting and really slow down and talk about what we need to do in those finishing stages of a painting. So what I'm doing now is I'm adding some warmth to some of these, but they're in the shadows, so they're not going to be glowing. I think the last thing that I might do, I need a little bit more grassy stuff. So I'm going to just kind of drag my bamboo skewer through and just kind of get a little bit more grassy action, I guess you could say. The other thing that I might consider doing is smoothing the sky a little bit. So I'm going to take my pinky finger, push the pastel a little bit, just gently into the groove of the paper a little bit more, just to calm the sky down slightly, because we had so much going on down here that we need to have some rest. Now that kind of eliminated my dark tree shape, so I'm going to just pull a little bit more of that back, but keep the sky a little bit simpler. It just really helps having an area of rest. I see that I dirtied my sky, my little sun, and I think I'm there. Another little purple guy right there, and maybe a little bit of purple guys right in here. But I'm gonna stop now, because this is the part where we get carried away and we overwork the painting because we're just having too much fun making marks. And my advice is, if you find yourself just having fun making marks, stop, put this painting aside, maybe start another one, and then come back with fresh eyes. So I'm going to take my own advice, and I'm going to stop, and I'll probably start another painting while I'm on a roll. I hope you've enjoyed this demo. I hope you've enjoyed seeing this one come to life and how we can work on a repurposed surface and get more mileage out of our papers. And yeah, and using a variety of marks to add interest and to create depth and to create that visual pathway that is important to a painting. So I hope you want to have fun with this one, give it a try, and see you next time. Let's paint.